All right, welcome everybody to the first WDL Radio of the summer 2022 season. Actually, the first WDL Radio we've done in 2 years. We did not do one last year at all,
At
and
all?
I think it's
Oh.
because we were getting old and busy, and this year we're just getting old and busy and doing it anyway.
Are you sure
So
we didn't? Me and you?
no, we did Vengeance last year.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So
Did we do one for Last
we-
Vengeance too, or was it?
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
Okay, I don't remember that shit, dude.
a couple months ago.
All right.
Anyway, usually you'll see Altstab here with me. He's currently locked in a bathroom somewhere. We can't really locate him. So we've got two, I wouldn't say fresh faces, old faces maybe. You know them.
All
We've
right.
got, well,
I shaved today. I'm fresh.
All right.
we've got Hate Daddy here with us,
Hello.
and we've got WDL Commissioner Zard himself, Ralphus.
Hello. Thank you.
Yeah, so summer 2022 started off pretty strong. We went down to 8 teams from 10, but it hasn't really changed any of the competition. Week 1 featured a ton of good games. We were playing a map that has never been played in a regular season match before, and that was a smart CTF map called Death from Above. So I just want to get started here. The first game of the week was BST and TWT, and I'll throw the stats up there. So this was a pretty close game, I think, not just stats-wise, but the way that it played as well. BST had 70 touches with 9 captures overall. TWT had 66 touches with 11 captures, so they were a little bit more accurate. The top capture, the top flaggers, I should say, Ross King and Tiger. Ross King had 7, Tiger had 6. In frags, this is where the discrepancy starts. TWT had 412, BST had 333. The high fragger in this game was Poto, who had 191. The next closest person was his teammate Denzoa with 133. So just looking at that right there, I think in this game the frags made the difference, and Poto really came out punching in this one. I mean, 191 frags to be 60 frags over the second next player is pretty impressive. So, but I thought both teams, obviously BST. Any team that's led by Ross King is going to have high communication, and I think this map in particular is just one of those maps that weird things can happen. You can get caught out of position very easily. It's not your typical map. So I think TWT did a great job of adjusting to what Ross King likes to do on offense, and that sort of continuous offensive presence that he has. TWT basically just put Poto out there and they fragged a bunch. So congrats to them. That was Poto's first. This is Poto's first WDL season as a captain, so he came out in game 1 pretty strong with his team.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
absolutely.
Rob.
The end of it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, it's exactly as you just said. Poto came out, just crushed it. Just to kind of look back on that, on how that game kind of unfolded. Best Ever comes out. They win the first round pretty decisively, 5-2. It's a Ross King team. He has Caution with him. 2 excellent players. Ross King, the last time he was in the league as a captain or a player, he won the championship. So, in some ways, he's never been beaten for that spot yet, even though he didn't play last season. So I think there's an expectation that he's going to always just kind of come out and do really well. And they did do that in the beginning. And Poto, this is his first season as a captain. And to his credit, he was able to turn it around, not only through his play, but, from kind of leading his team into a 3-round victory here. And I think, as you said, when you kind of look at that game that opens the season up on an unfamiliar map, I think Ross King's team kind of came out and overwhelmed him at first. But once they allowed Poto to really settle in and kind of play his frag game, because that first round they held Poto to only 48 frags. And the difference in that first round, Best Ever was only down by 18 total frags, and they won. And I think if you kind of go back and you look at the frag count, it correlates with what played out in that game. So you had Best Ever in that first round. They were only down 18 frags. That was to their benefit. They really stopped Poto from doing what Poto does. And in the later rounds, Poto just was allowed to just run amok on them. They won the second round by something over 30 frags, and Poto himself had 63 frags, so he was kind of untethered at that point, and that was the round that they had the largest margin, 5-2. So when they went into that third round, Best Ever was able to kind of get a little closer in frags again, but they still were down almost 30, and they ended up losing by two flags in that game. But again, Poto had 80 frags in a 10-minute game. That's just incredible and insane. And his kill death was super high, 163. So I think the tail of the tape in that game was that, of course, Best Ever is a very talented team. And despite the fact that they might have lost week one, I still would have them at the top of my rankings for who I likely would pick to see in the finals this season. But they weren't able to stop the mid dominance of TWT. And I think they're going to get that under control as the season goes on. I have no doubt. But in week one, it really bit them because Poto and Denzoa they just had huge kill death ratios. And you can't let two guys do that to you in this league, or you're never going to score.
Yeah. So I kind of have the same feeling about Ralph does as far as my opinion on BST goes. I still wouldn't overreact to this loss. It's important to have context here. Number one, Jake has been out of practice. Jake, when I say Jake, I'm referring to Caution. He's somebody that's a veteran. He's a champion, so he'll get together and he'll be fine in a few weeks. Interestingly enough, this is the first loss BST has had since 20. I mean, they didn't lose in 2020. They didn't drop. I mean, they dropped some rounds, but they didn't lose a series in 2020 when they won the championship. They had won the one before that, and I know there was a delay for a couple of years between 2020 and the prior year. So, I mean, this is, funnily enough, the first time in years that BST has actually officially lost a series.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot. I mean, you're Poto, and to be clear, Poto's a rookie as a captain, but Poto is not a rookie player. Poto has been a captain in other leagues and has performed very well in various leagues. So this isn't surprising that he played well. I would pump the brakes a little bit on being concerned about the frag difference. It is concerning, especially the later rounds, the second and third round. But Ross King teams tend to get out fragged a lot. That's a product of the way he plays because he's very aggressive. His team are very aggressive. Oftentimes, you've got 2, sometimes 3 guys rotating in on that flag when they establish control. Even when they won the championship in 2020, they were, I think, they played 5, 6, 7 games. I think I'm going off the top of my head, but I think over half of them they were out fragged, and they were undefeated. So it's not as if being out fragged is a bad thing, but there is truth to the idea that when you look at the second and the third rounds, there was a significantly higher discrepancy in frags. First round, you can kind of look at the stats and you can see some interesting things. They're getting quality touches, they're dying more, but they're getting those across. Then you look at the second and third round, the touches are relatively even, but the frag discrepancy goes up, and that goes back to what Ralph said when they established control in mid TWT, that is, in those second and third rounds, and that just made it difficult. This is the one area where Caboose's team is always flirting with death. They're going to get out fragged, and in this game, I think it bit them. But I'm not concerned about them going forward because I think Caution is going to get into good form. He'll be able to provide a little bit more oomph that team is going to need in order to play the way that Caution or Caboose wants them to play. And I think Ion is a solid enough player that they can pretty much plug him in anywhere and be successful.
Well, I probably should have started off where we could actually discuss the map itself, but I think this is a good time to do it because, talking about how this is, BSTs, and granted, they're not the same. It's not the same team lineup, but, the method that Ross King has been using is very effective for him and for all of his teams. So here's a map that kind of, in my opinion, sort of twists, your typical map upside down and your typical type of strategy upside down. So, do we want to talk about the map and how it really affects the way that teams are playing and the way that they're constructed? Because I think it's very unique in the way that there's just, how do you defend a map where you've got 6 ways out essentially? I mean, I'm over exaggerating, but there's so many ways out. It's a really difficult map to defend, and it relies so much on teamwork, but it's really so heavy on distraction. The mid player can lower the gate or the lift, or the mid player can go through the teleporter, or the mid player can do all of these things to distract a defender while the runner comes in and grabs the flag, and vice versa. So I think it's definitely a type of map that we haven't really seen in the league before. So I don't know. That's why I like playing new maps, because I think it sort of ups it ups the level of meta, and it sort of changes the game. And this was a really interesting map to see. I saw some players go through the lift and do rocket jumps. They were rocket jumping over into the other base and like landing in the tunnel. And it's like,
Yeah.
I know I don't use free look, but I think even if I did, I wouldn't think of that. It's just really interesting. So how does the map actually affect how teams are playing?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll go. So I'm actually going to say I don't think it's all that different. It's different than your traditional map from other packs that we've seen, but at this point, this is a pretty common style of map that you get from Chain Dude maps, from the Smart CTF series. Oftentimes, you establish control more in mid than you do as a defender, that is, in mid than you do by sitting on your flag. And that was kind of the goal of Chain Dude with his maps anyway, is that you don't have these stagnant maps where you're sitting one guy on top of a flag, sitting one guy in mid, and sitting one guy running constantly. It requires teamwork. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's really all that unique anymore, because we've played enough Smart CTF maps that this style is kind of maybe not refined, but at least familiar to the player base. I do think it favors a certain type of team more than another. I think more not finesse teams maybe is not the proper way to say it, but like teams that have players that can do some of the trickier things like rocket jumping, lift jumping, that sort of thing. It gives them more room to work with, as opposed to, an old map like Mount Zero or something like that. So from that standpoint, I would just say it's a good map. It's unique in its own right, but I think we've seen enough Smart CTF maps now that I'm not ready to say this is a brand new, unprecedented, never before seen style of map. I think we've seen enough of these maps now that the player base has a good grasp on it.
I do agree that the player base has a grasp on it, but I do think that the unfamiliarity of this map in the first week has been interesting to see. I know that so in this map, it feels really long, but actually it's really short between the flags. You have those 2 lifts that drop down. Technically, I think you can make it between flags in like 3 to 4 seconds if the stars align. And everyone kind of spawns in mid. And one thing that I saw broadcasting these games, which is kind of nice because you get to see a little bit of everybody, what's going on in all the different positions, is a lot of times on a more traditional map, let's say like the Mount Zeros or the map 4s, the old school maps that are just kind of straight head on. When the defender is killed, they usually get another chance spawning in front of the runner. And this map, and a lot of Smart CTF maps, the defender often spawns back towards the middle and has to come back and meet the runner. And the problem for a lot of defenders that I saw this week was, at least maybe not the defenders themselves as a singular person, but the teams, the defenders communicating with with their middle players that are trying to help support them. is when they get killed, they lose their eyes on that runner. And now they don't know, did they go through the tunnel? Are they waiting at the lift? Are they waiting in the base? Are they coming out the top path, the lower path? They can even come out that little window. So there's like 4.5 exits out of the base. And when those defenders were losing eyes on them, it kind of put them in a predicament. I don't think that was as big of a factor in this game, but a game we're going to talk about later, I think I saw a lot of that, where I think in a more traditional type of map, a team would be able to mitigate those issues. But here, they just, when you don't have that coordination between your players and nobody knows where that runner is, it could be catastrophic.
Yeah, all right. So speaking of talking about other games, let's move to SGS and SXP, which actually was you and me hate. So SGS, they won this one in 2 rounds. SGS had 40 touches with 8 captures. SXP had 55 touches with 3 captures. Leading captures are Hate Daddy with 4 and Ed with 4 also. Frags, another sort of large discrepancy here. SGS had 257. SXP had 185. The high fragger was Ed with 110. Second highest was Dragon with 82. So, I'll go first. I mean, I think the frags. I don't know how much the frags played a part in us losing this game. I felt like while we were playing, we were still in the game no matter what part of the match it was. I just felt like we kind of got a couple things happened where we just sort of lost communication, and we lost some flag standoffs. I'm gonna maybe stall for a minute until he comes back. Yeah, we just lost a couple of things there, like a couple of flag standoffs and stuff. And, I think it was actually a credit to your team's communication and your ability to work together to get some flags out. You guys were doing a really good job with the lift. And I noticed that when my team got a little out of position, even though we were regrouping, we weren't utilizing the lift to its advantage. We weren't really supporting our runner. And, we were just sort of a little all over the place. And, I think, it's a week 1 game and those are things that you can fix, but it was definitely like, you guys clearly understood the map better. You clearly had better communication, and, plopping Ed in the middle and having him, frag a bunch of people didn't hurt either. So yeah, I didn't feel like when you lose, you feel like you feel bad, but then I went back and I watched the stream and I was like, oh, this game was actually a little bit closer than I thought. Like, there were some things that I would do differently. But overall, I thought it was a really good game.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm happy that we won. But our style, our way that we organized and practiced was such that we kind of touched on this when we talked about the map itself. We knew there's very little that you can do to stop a team from getting a lot of touches. There's too many entrances into the base. So our goal was basically to just contain. We're fine with you coming into our flag room and touching our flag, but we're not letting you out of the base. And one of the styles that we found to be the most successful was, okay, well, what a lot of people do traditionally when you have somebody come in, they touch your flag, you don't necessarily know where they're at exactly, is they panic and they're like, okay, go get the flag guy. Whereas our style was like, nope, we're going to go get their flag and we're going to force a standoff. And we trust that Hate and Ed are going to whoop anybody's ass in a standoff if they come at us. And that didn't happen a lot. What tended to happen more was I would get the flag and I would just hide in your base. And I would wait for a return and med to be cleared. And I'd just come out. And that was kind of reflected by the touches. There was actually a significant discrepancy in touches. We had less touches than you guys. So our goal was like, we're not focused on touches as much as we are quality touches. And I say this a lot, to the point of ad nauseum, but I tend to believe in a style more about, it's not so much about touches, it's about quality touches. You don't do any good to just throw zombies at the flag if you're never going to get any of them out. So we focused on mid control and winning standoffs and containing guys when they got into our base. So for me, I mean, I know you felt like it was close, and certainly, it was, but for me, I never felt like we were in danger of losing. I felt like we had established control. There were a couple flags you guys got out on us where it was like, oh crap, my bad. One which I just completely choked on a shot that I could have returned. So it was a boring game probably to watch, but it's an effective strategy, I felt like. And I think most of it was probably that we were probably just more well-practiced than you guys were. I know you didn't have a chance to practice a whole lot. So we had other strategies that we had practiced and were willing to implement had it come to that point. But we never did.
I think it's interesting because I typically follow your type of strategy. I'm not really about touches either. I'm about mid control. But I used your strategy, what you mentioned about how if you get our flag, don't turn around and try and return it. Like try to return it, but we always need to have somebody running to get the flag. And oftentimes I found that to be me in those situations where I was in an advantageous position and I was like, I'm just going to go grab the flag. And as the mid, I think that may have been a mistake because it was really my job to, control where everything was going and to let people know. So when I sort of abandoned the middle, it was like, well, yeah, I have the flag, but the rest of my team is kind of clueless as to what's going on. So, shit happens. But at least you thought it wasn't close. That's fine. We can disagree on that.
Sorry, I don't like. I'm not trying to
No.
shit on you. Like,
no, it's all good.
I just, it's just.
Well, I thought it was
I've
a lot
always
worse.
played.
I thought it was a lot worse than it was. So when I watched the stream, I was like, okay, we didn't lose that bad. So, I know we still lost.
Well, let me interject as the objective observer this week. I think it was somewhat close for a little bit, and then I think the wheels fell off for SXP. Key notes I have from this game. So number one, this is kind of the return of the third, right? For the Spurs, Azriel came out and had just like a monster opening game. His first round was just crazy. He had like a 223% kill death. And even in the next round, he had 133%. He was just crushing it. He wasn't getting touches. As a matter of fact, he didn't even touch the flag more than once, which was just a pickup. So he didn't attack. He didn't worry about that. He was just focused on his job. And I think as the game went on, right, in the first round, you kind of see everybody feeling each other out. The map's kind of new. Of course, Ed and Hate Daddy are two of the most prolific fraggers in this league. So it's not a surprise that they're out there cutting everybody up, and Bones and Dragon are known for that as well. I think this really kind of came down to I'm 1 HP. He was having some issues getting the flag out. And then I think what happened is that the first round, if you go back, there was some opportunities for SXP that looked really close. It was like, that could have went either way. And the entire makeup of that round and the entire game could have ended up differently. But after SXP lost that first round, the second round felt totally different, almost like the Spurs were able to kind of just bend SXP to their will. And I think you see that in pretty much all of the stat lines. And if you go back and look, I mean, it was only a 6-minute round. The most telling stat to me is touches. The second round, just barely any touches by the Spurs, and yet they were converting at an insane rate. Hate Daddy had 8 touches with 2 points. So that's huge. That's a 25% capture rate on a touch. That's the type of stat that sends you to championships. Ed touched it 4 times. He scored 3 times. So 75%. You don't really see those numbers very often. And I think to go back to what you said about maybe what your shortcomings were this week, Bones, maybe communication issues where people were just kind of losing track of, the Panthers were losing track of where the Spurs were, and the Spurs were just kind of running out to mid and just roasting by the second round. So I think it was close in the first round, and then the game kind of got away, and that was it. But it was an interesting game to watch. It was not the most one-sided game of the week by any stretch of the imagination, but it was kind of like a foretelling of what the next game was going to end up being. So I think both teams probably didn't play their best, truthfully. I think both teams have a lot of room to improve. Of course, it's only week 1, and I'm curious to see how the Spurs are going to keep this offense running, because I think a lot of people probably were thinking, well, there might be some sort of offensive deficiencies, but at the end of week 1, it didn't seem to be the case. So we'll have to see how that pans out over the next, course of the season here.
Well, that's a great time to transition to the next game, which ended up being the game that I think is the most lopsided match, which was SFP versus RIP. Yeah, let's go through the stats. So SFP, they won this game in 2. They had 24 touches and 10 captures. So they won both rounds 5-0. RIP had 26 touches, so more touches, but they only had 1 capture. And the leading flag scorer was XWiz with 7. Frags, not a huge difference necessarily. SFP, I'm going to have a hard time with that, had 144 frags, and RIP had 113. The high fragger was Ninja Dog with 70. So, that first round, I don't know that RIP knew really what hit them. They really couldn't adjust. And, they talked about their lack of practice as well. So I'm sure that came into play. But it was just, every time XWiz touched the flag, more or less, I felt like he was scoring. He was pretty unopposed every run. And they just had total control of that. And so, RIP had, in that round, it was Stal, Skull Rush, and Disparel. And so they lost that one, and then they put Dosu into round 2, and it felt like maybe it stabilized for a little bit. They were still getting outscored a lot, but they were able to grab a flag. So maybe that's a lineup that they can explore more if they get more practice in the future. But there's not too much to say about this. I don't think RIP got a lot of practice, and I think SFP just came out and was like, yeah, this is this is probably going to be our home field map. I don't know. But they played really, really well. And like I said, it was like watching a scoring clinic really with XWiz. He did a lot of good stuff in this game.
Well, I'm going to go deal with this baby. You
I'll talk.
That's RIP crying in the background. Not funny. Okay, go ahead. That's me crying after a loss. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about the game. I think you're right. SFP was significantly more practiced. So I'm not going to really beat the dead horse on that one. What I am going to do is I'm going to, take this time to give a little bit of spotlight and shout out to Saltmine. I know he's had a chance to play in the past in Vengeance. He got some game time last season in Vengeance. He's been on a couple of WDL teams. Did he come in 20 or 21? I don't remember. If he's here and he's watching, feel free to correct me on that, or at least guide me in the right direction. He's a young guy, a new player, so I'm happy to see a new player come out, be a legitimate starter on a championship caliber team. Now, there's no denying that X-Wiz and Ninja Dog are excellent players, championship caliber players that have won championships in other leagues. So of course it's easy to look at this team and say, well, yeah, this is it's a two-man show. But I really do think that this team will go as far as Salt Mine takes them, because this is the makeup of pretty much every team. You have two really, really fantastic players. Then you have a third player who is either relatively unknown or maybe hasn't had a chance to shine in the past. And in this case, SFP's case with Salt Mine, he's a starter. He's going to be the starter. Whereas in past seasons and past leagues, he might have been a starter, borderline starter. Now it's like, okay, it's your time. Like, you have to step up. And this week it didn't matter, but there's going to be a point where SFP is going to need Salt Mine to step up and be big. And I think games like this where you can, get them out there, get them experienced, you're constantly communicating, practicing. He's already a good player, so it's not like Salt Mine is like, some scrub off the street. This is huge for them, and I think that it's going to go a long way. So I'm really happy to see a new player get some shine like that. And that's what I'd rather focus on, because I don't think it's worth really exploring an analytical background on this game. There's nothing to analyze. I mean, Stahl is a good player, great captain. He's won championships. They've got proven players on that team. They just didn't practice. That's what it is. And I don't want to take anything away from SFP, because they did what they were supposed to do. They didn't practice, so they came out here and they took you behind the woodshed. And that's what's going to happen. That's a notice to everybody in the rest of the league. Mess around and you'll find out. If you don't practice, that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to get 10-0'd.
Yeah, for sure. I think, this season going from 10 teams to 8 teams, the talent becomes a little bit tighter, and there's really not room to mess around, or you'll find out.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened here. Like you said, there's really no point going into a big analysis on this game. I think this is probably one of the fastest all-time WDL games, bell to bell. I think it clocked in at like under 9 minutes or something like that. And the story's simple. Okay, you look at Rip. Obviously, Stahl is still a great player. He has great players around him. Skull Rush, Desparrow, Dosu, all starters in my opinion, easily. And they just did not practice at all. And Ninja Dog, to his credit, his first time as a captain in this league in the IDL, WDL lineage, he came out, took it very serious. X-Wiz and Salt Mine were in there practicing with him like constantly. And, you get what you deserve sometimes. And I think Rip got what they deserved, which was they just kind of got spanked. I think that kind of looking ahead, maybe outside of the confines of this game, is Stahl's going to have some decisions to make, I think, depending on how this week it goes coming up, because their game is tomorrow. And not only how this game tomorrow night goes, but, how are they going to get practice this season? Having 4 great players on a team is great, but if you never get to play with each other, it's not going to matter. Even if you somehow squeak into the playoffs, you're not going to do it. So they have to figure out their schedule, or I think Stahl's going to be faced with a decision where it's like maybe kind of go behind the scenes and start seeing what trade options are available to get something a little bit more stable, because the best ability is availability in most cases. And if you're never able to practice, that's not going to help you. So I think Rip is in a situation there where it's kind of a personnel roster scheduling issue more than anything else. They have the talent. But like you said, did not take anything away from SFP. Ninja Dog did a great job. X-Wiz did a great job. And Salt Mine, who I had a chance to play with in Vengeance, I think that he's kind of like one of the up-and-coming players in this community. He's getting the reps right now, and they're going to be important come September when the playoffs start, because I don't see a situation where this team is not in it. SFP will be in the playoffs. So it's good experience. And when the bright lights come on in September and it's win or go home, that's when you find out what you're made of. So yeah, Rip's got to get it together. There's just no other way about it.
Yep.
And jumping ahead to the last game of the week, probably the most exciting game. It was a 3-rounder. It was OO, or I don't know, what are we saying? OO versus LOS. So OO, I'll just do that. They won in 3, and they won. Their round 3 win was a 5-4 victory, so very close. They had 69 touches with 12 captures, and LOS had 71 touches and 8 captures. Leading scorer Daston with 9, and Legion with 5. So the frag count, not much of a difference there. OO 323, LOS 313. The high fragger was Infer with 123. So they managed to tie in the first round. Sharp scored the first 2 flags of the first round, I believe, and then LOS came back and tied it up 2-2. OO took the second round pretty decisively, 5-2. And then if you take a look at round 3, it was kind of a back and forth affair. So it seems like they kind of felt each other out the first 2 rounds. And then round 3, it was kind of all out, just going back and forth, which I think those are always the most exciting games. I can't really say that one team was like completely better than the other. I think it was probably as close of a game as you're going to get in terms of, how they're playing. So, I will say that I did not see LOS practice much at all this week. I mean, here's another team with a bunch of veteran players. How much practice do you need? But, OO was practicing like every day, all week. And I think that really paid off for them. I mean, I think some of the practices that we got, there were 15 rounds against those guys, and they played like 10 before and 10 after. I mean, they're just going nuts. So, good for them. I think they really settled on, a lineup that works and, strategy for them. So I think that, to me, that's the team that you want to have, the type of team that you want to have, where there's just a bunch of guys willing to practice and, not afraid to try out different things and to put other people in the lineup. It's just, to me, the most complete team. So they're my favorite at the moment, just based on their practice and the way that they've conducted themselves through week 1. But LOS, they just got to get around more. They just got to practice a little bit more. Probably, slightly more difficult for them because, a bunch of old people, but I think they'll get there.
Go ahead, Ruff.
Sure. So I had the opportunity to broadcast this game kind of delayed tonight. I did a broadcast of this because I hadn't had a chance to see it on Sunday. And interesting game for sure. You look at the box score, you probably think this is probably the game of the week, arguably, maybe. I actually don't think it was the game of the week. I think that the best ever versus TWT was. But this was an interesting game, no doubt. Like you said, I think, Los, they lost, but they didn't really lose by a lot. And actually, going back and watching that full game and kind of jumping around, there were so many points in that game where just a player kind of looking a different direction or making just a small different decision. I think this actually easily should have gone in their favor. And as you say, this is kind of a preparation issue because when I look at how the teams played and knowing kind of what their preparation was, as you said, OO, they had a ton of preparation all week. It was a lot closer than I think it should have been given that. And I think that Ty, Dranzer, Legion, and Chain are all super great players, and that helps keep them alive in these situations where they don't have nearly as much practice as the other team. I don't think that's going to work for them all season. It didn't work for them here. They ended up eating the loss, but interesting to see. I think that when you look at the box score again, kind of you see Daston, of course he had a great game. He scored a lot of flags, but in the context of the game itself, the standout player to me on Double O was Sharp. I think he was a very critical player for them. He had great penetration getting to that flag, and he was able to get in there and touch the flag enough that it scrambled Los all over the place. Even depending on which lineup they played, they put Chain Dude in the last round. They had a little bit more life, but Sharp was playing great. And you spoke earlier about one of those rocket jumps from the one side to the other, and Sharp was one of those players that I actually happened to get on camera jumping from the tunnel to the tunnel. So, yeah, definitely interesting game. And I think that if Los wants to win anything in this league, they're going to have to practice just like Rip. It's the same sort of thing. I'm not ready to crown Double O as the favorites. I didn't see that this week. They played good. There's a ton of season left, but in my opinion, Best Ever and SFP are probably the 1 and the 2 right now. And I think the jury's out on Double O.
So yeah, I'm going to go with Ralph. I don't actually think this game was. The game was interesting. Let me say that first, but I think the storyline within the game is more interesting than the game itself. The storyline being that I thought they handled themselves well. They took care of business. I think they're kind of a lot like Daston's team last season that won the championship. If you remember, they lost the first game last year to a team that they played in the playoffs and beat in like 6 minutes. So, this is kind of consistent Daston team from what we've seen. They come out maybe a little sluggish, especially in the first round. And they took care of business in the second round, but the third round was kind of like a barn burner. But they just look like the more practiced team. I'm looking at LOS, and I'm thinking the storyline behind this team is fascinating. You've got 4 bona fide starters on that team. Ty's a championship winning captain. Dranzer was on Daston's team last season that won the championship, and Dranzer has been on championship teams before. I don't know if Chain Dude has been on a championship team. I can't recall one that he's been on that's actually won. I know he's been in several championship appearances, but I don't know if he's actually ever won one.
Didn't he win season 4?
Of what?
IDO.
He never won an IDO. I know he never won in the IDO.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know about maybe in Vengeance or WDL. But I know he never won in the IDO. I know he had been in the finals a few times, but and if I'm wrong, like by all means, correct me.
I think the only finals appearance was the very first season of IDL.
Yeah.
All the way back in winter 2007.
Yeah, I'm not trying to by the way, I'm not trying to dunk on Chain Dude here.
Yeah, Chain, you suck.
No, he's a great player.
Kidding. He is good.
Correct. He only made one
is,
appearance in winter 2007. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Great player, right? And then Legion, who, especially in the last 7 years or so, has really taken a step to being a phenomenal player. And he kind of gets overlooked because he has this stigma of, well, it's Legion. So, but Legion's a very competent player. Like he's effective as a fragger, a runner, a defender. I look at this team and I'm not so sure Ty isn't the worst player on this team right now. I kind of meant that Ralph and I talked about this a little bit earlier. Now I will never advocate for a captain to bench himself.
I agree.
I am 100% against that. If you do that, don't sign up as a captain. But that still doesn't change the dynamics of this team right now. I think Ty in practice, in form, as a shot caller, as kind of the leader, is the most valuable piece that this team has. So there's that. Second thing is, and this is kind of more of game related, is LOS was not a team that practiced a whole lot this week. But yet they were competitive against a team that in my mind is clearly better than they were. So I want to look at why that is. And it's possible maybe this was home field advantage, kind of. This was a map Chain Dude made. Chain Dude played very well. Is this
He only
something
played one round?
He did only play one round. That's true. But, I don't know how many practices LOS had, if any, with Chain Dude there as an influence for telling the team, like, hey, do this, offering guidance. So my point is this something that's going to translate into the next couple of weeks when they play maps that they don't have players that have that kind of experience and that kind of insight to a map? I don't necessarily, like I said, with like Ralph said, especially like round 3, honestly, LOS should have won round 3. Like, if you go back and watch the game,
Yeah,
they
should have.
had more conversion opportunities than OO did. They
lost
didn't
so many
make
at
them.
the stand.
Yeah. Just didn't make them. And a lot of times when you see that in a game, that team wins. Because if you're in position to convert flags, you're controlling the game. And they weren't, to be clear, like, they weren't in control, but they were, it's right there. Like, it was neck and neck. So I don't know. I said at the beginning of the season, I believe this was the team I had the most questions about. That was without the context of knowing that Rip had so many scheduling issues and practicing issues. I think now Rip is a team I have most questions about. But I still have a lot of questions about this team. I haven't seen Ty play a lot. Ty is out of practice. What is this team's starting lineup? Because it can be a curse to have 4 really good players on a team. It really can be, because you go 1 week and it's like, well, we didn't lose, so I need to bring in a new player. You got to lose that next week, and then you're like, shuffling a roster throughout a season is not good for a team going, in the long run. You want to be able to build chemistry with a consistent lineup. I'm not saying it's bad to have a strong 4th. I mean, look at last season for Vengeance, for crying out loud. That's the only reason why Ninja Dog's team won the championship, was because they had a strong 4th that they could insert in the last map that came in and played well. So it's not to say that a good 4th doesn't make a difference, but I mean, man, like, if there's like legitimate question to who's the starting 3 on this team, and we're going into week 2, boy, that's not a problem I want to have. But the flip side of it is if you're Ty, I'm not giving Legion or Chain Dude, and I think Dranzer unquestionably is not on the trade block. You don't trade Dranzer. I'm not giving another team Legion or Chain Dude. I'm not empowering another team. So I don't know. Like, I tend to believe, like, I see where, not unless they can like flip some sort of trade that just empowers them disproportionately. But I don't see it.
There's some opportunities out here. I think it's, these captains have to look at, okay, how available can I make these players around my schedule so that we can get practices and win games? And it doesn't matter if you have the 3rd or the 1st best player in the league if you never get to play with them. So I think that, like, you look at a team like Rip and like Los, there's opportunity for a trade there. Stal has the number 1 home field pick. He could package that and send that in with, however they want to do it. They could even probably get some type of 3rd team involved. I'm not quite sure. I kind of was looking around the rosters to see who might be a viable candidate for that. I'm not sure that that's out there right now, until teams start getting desperate after this weekend. But I think it's something that maybe they want to just think about, even if they don't talk to each other about it yet. It needs to be something that they're thinking, all right, yeah, I have this great player, but it's not really benefiting me because we don't ever get to play together. And how's that going to pan out over the next 4 weeks? So especially once next week when the trade deadline comes up next Wednesday. So yeah, there's definitely some decisions to be made here. I'm not sure that either of them would make a move, but it might not be the worst thing to get together and maybe kind of brainstorm and see if there's something there, because they all have great players on their teams. And what's that?
You should always be thinking about trades. Doesn't matter what your record is.
Yeah. Well, I think Ty, I think Ty has
I've traded people that I've drafted for $26, you know.
Well,
So
I think Ty has an attractive trade package that he can offer. I mean, saying, for example, I'll give you Legion and Chain Dude for I'm just gonna throw somebody out there. Like, hey, I'll give you Legion and Chain Dude for Ed. That's an attractive package. And that could theoretically benefit both teams. Or you would say, hey, Ninja Dog, Legion and Chain Dude for Salt Mine and X-Wiz. Again, that empowers both teams. But obviously, I feel like, well, no, we're good as we are. I'm not, why mess up a good thing? And Ninja Dog is going to probably feel the same way. But I'm just illustrating a point that Ty does have a very good package that he could throw out there. And
everyone loves Ty's package.
Yeah. there's a good chance that he's not going to get a favorable trade in terms of value for two players, but he doesn't need two players. He just really, I think Dranzer's pretty flexible in schedule. My understanding about Ty's team's issue is that they don't have time to get Chain Dude involved as much. And I think Legion is pretty flexible too. So I don't know. If I were Ty's team, I would just say, look, like if we can't get Chain Dude in games because of his busy schedule, then we just need to run Ty, Legion, and Dranzer. But yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, we'll see what happens week 2 because I don't think any team right now is in desperate need of trading, maybe with the exception of Rip. But we'll see. I mean, let's let week 2 play out, and then obviously we'll see if anybody makes a move.
Sure.
Well, everybody keeps talking about week 2. Let's move on to that week 2 map. We are playing Wanderlust, which I think, and certainly in comparison to week 1, is a much more simple, straightforward layout. You know, you've got limited amounts of entrances into the base. Well, maybe not limited amount, but they're all sort of centralized, easier to defend against. You're not really having your back turned. There are points in the map where you don't have to have your back turned to an entrance. So I think that bodes well for defenders. And so, you know, as a consequence of that, I feel like the map is a little bit less of an opportunity to have a team. You know, we're not going to see like a huge amount of touches. I feel like I could be wrong, but I think there will be less touches than there were in week 1. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, now we talk about the strategies of teams in week 1. Now they're going to change. Maybe they start to favor some of the teams that were constructed differently, how they play in week 2. And we got some really interesting matchups. So I'll run through the matchups real fast. You guys can jump in and talk about the map, and then we'll give some predictions. So right here at the bottom, we got RIP versus SGS. That is tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And we've got a triple header on Sunday. We've got TWT versus Double O. I skipped one. SXP versus SFP. I'm going to have a hard time with that. Sunday at 3:45. TWT versus Double O, Sunday at 8 p.m. And LOS versus BST. That is Sunday at 9:30. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what this map is going to have in store for us this week.
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in here first. So the map, there's actually a fix going to go up on the server, but it's not really going to change really how the map plays. But I think it's an interesting map. It's not symmetrical. It's mirrored, kind of like a map 8, a ZDCTF map 8 sort of thing. So I think that's interesting. I don't know if one side favors one team or not, but you do have to go between bases, so you have to go both ways anyway. This is kind of a season of firsts for the WDL. I think every map being played is the first time it's been played in the WDL. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a little more conventional than what we've seen up to this point in the first week. But I think there's probably going to be some surprises. I think you're going to see people use that lift to try and time and do some tricks. And I think you're probably going to see some sort of rocket jumps. I don't know what they're going to do, but I would bet that we're going to see some. So it should be an interesting map. And also there's a soul sphere that sits up on that top lava path. And it'll be interesting to see how or if that plays any effect at all in such a wide open mid. I'm not sure that it will, but I guess we're going to find out.
Yeah, it is. It is actually. I will say, generally mirrored maps are a little bit harder to learn. They require more practice, and they're ones where as a team, you're really like, no, listen, this week we're not. We're practicing on the color that we're going to be. We're not practicing on the other color. Whereas symmetrical maps, it doesn't really matter. So I think that's one thing to consider if that'll have any impact. There are some neat lift tricks that you can do. There is a lift jump on every lift, and I repeat, every lift you can pull off a lift jump. We'll see if anybody really gets those down consistently enough that they can make an impact. I think the green armor probably actually has a more valuable potential than the sphere does. Sphere is just in such a wide open area that there's a good chance you're never going to grab that thing without getting blasted. Whereas a green armor is kind of off the beaten path in another area. It gets forgotten and overlooked. I mean, certainly from what I've seen in practice myself and watching other teams, that green armor's played a pretty significant role. You could still be one shot, to be clear, but yeah, I definitely think that this is more your traditional grind map, but being mirrored does make it a little bit more challenging than your traditional grind map.
Yeah, sorry, I was typing a comment. So the first game, which is your game, RIP versus SGS. I think actually, again, I mean, we can talk about, whether or not RIP's going to be able to get any practice, but I think that it's going to matter a little bit less on a map like this because it is fairly straightforward. Obviously, communication is a big deal, but I can see players like Stal and Skull Rush, and even Dosu. I've been practicing against Dosu, practicing against all those guys, and a map like this is going to be harder to make those kind of moves on them because they are, solid. They're just solid players that they're not going to be fooled very easily, and there's not a lot of ability to fool people here. So, on paper, this matchup looks great. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. If Rip can get a lot of practice, I would probably pick them. But, at the same time, like, you guys are great. And, like, Azrael is a fucking he's a turret. So, if he defends like he did last week, it's going to be really hard for anybody to get any flags out on him. So I'm going to go with SGS in 3 because I don't think Rip's going to get enough practice in before tomorrow, and I think you guys are just sort of on a roll from last week. So that's me.
I really want to be able to say that I think that Rip is going to come out and be really good, and I think it's going to be another rough week for him. So I hope they prove me wrong. I just don't know that the practice is there. Again, the same issues that kind of led to week 1. I'm kind of assuming that they're going to peek their head in again, and it's just not going to be good for Rip and Tear. SGS looked real strong last week against SXP. I think that these types of open maps really cater to players like Ed and Hate Daddy and Azrael. All 3 fraggers, in my opinion, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Rip. I hope they prove me wrong. I would love to be wrong, but I got to go SGS in 2 here. Just
they're trying to prove us wrong right now by practicing.
That's good.
That's
good.
I'll go help them.
Feel free to comment on your own game in any fashion you'd like.
I elect to recuse myself.
Okay, so the next game then is SXP versus SFP. I'm glad that I'm not going to have to stream that one because I can't say those letters together without stuttering. I'm also probably going to recuse myself other than to say I did not like this map prior to this week. and now that I've been playing it, I enjoy it a lot. So another solid map choice for week 2.
Yeah, so I think similar to Rip, I think SXP is kind of in dire straits here. Being 0-2 is to start out a season is a bad you can recover. There's plenty of time.
I recovered one time and then we won the whole season.
Yeah, but anyway,
Just saying.
you can recover, but you don't want to go 0-2, then start out again and turn around and lose week 2 0-2, because now you're digging yourself a really deep hole. Again, you can still make it. It's a competitive league, but I naturally, I think everybody's looking at this game. SXP or SFP is probably the team that you want to favor here. I see no reason not to, but I would say don't sleep on SXP. Bones and Dragon have a lot of chemistry with each other. Toby, throw him in there. Dragon is a renowned fragger. I'm at 1 HP. 0 is also a very good fragger, depending on whether or not they can get Toby into the lineup to get him maybe on O. I think SXP can make some noise here. I anticipate a close loss. Maybe similar to week 1 against us, where you kind of have like this 3-1, kind of 4-1 grind out loss. You guys don't get run off the field, but you probably don't really have any real chance of winning either. So you're competitive, but you're not gonna get blown out of the server either. So I'll just say, give me SFP 2-0 with, like I said, those grindy scores, like something to that effect.
Yeah. So Panthers versus Plex. That's how I'm going to broadcast this game. Panthers obviously have all the tools that they need to do something like this. They have experience. They have skill. But everyone knows that it's 10% luck, 20% skill, and 15% concentrated power and will. It's 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reasons.
I have a mute feature here.
100% reasons that the Panthers are going to lose this game, because there's just no way that they're going to come out and beat Plex this week. I prove me wrong, Bones, but Plex right now, I think that they look hot. I think that they're riding some great practice time. Salt Mine's looking good. Absent a catastrophe or something going just horribly wrong at game time, I think just the practice alone with Ninja Dog and X-Wiz is not only their just ability but their chemistry. I think that it's going to favor them here. I think Ninja Dog is obviously one of the preeminent fraggers going today. If you look at last season's Vengeance, and it's going to be tough for the Panthers to overcome. It's not impossible. I don't think that I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be a 5-0, 5-0 blowout. I don't know that that's going to be the case, but I think it's going to be hard for the Panthers to score on this team. And I think that when I look at the makeup of these teams right now, I think that's going to kind of be the Panthers' problem all season. Prove me wrong. Fine being wrong. But I think
my favorite thing to do is to prove Ralph wrong.
Plex in two.
Fair enough. So the next game, which is, I think, for me, this is the game that I'm circling as the game that I really want to see, is TWT versus 00. I really like how I think these teams match up really well against each other. And it's going to be interesting to see, how Poto approaches setting up his lineup against Daston here. I don't know. Daston is just a player that can sometimes take over an entire game, and I'm not sure that we've seen Denzoa do it, and I mean even arguably we saw Poto do it in week 1, but I think more often than not we see Daston do it. We see him take over games completely, and I know that Sharp was probably the secret weapon last week, but it still sort of all revolves around the ability of Dastin, and so I have gotten to the point where I no longer doubt Dastin's ability to lead a team. So, on a map like this, I know Dastin is known for his rocket jumping, and he's known for being able to score, but he's also a really accomplished fragger too. So you combine all of those things together, this is kind of the perfect map for him. It's really close quartered. He's going to be able to frag a lot. You have to frag a lot to get a flag out. So I think this really favors Double O in a lot of ways. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised if TWT came out and stole this game from Double O. I mean, it's so hard to pick. I don't really know who to pick, but yeah, I think Double O wins this 1 in 3. I think it's going to be another 3-rounder. I typically never choose teams winning in 2, unless it's my own team. So, but I think Double O in 3 here.
So I'm gonna say Double O in 2. I'm with you in that I think it'll be competitive. I just think these are the same teams, but Double O is just a better version. I think Dastin and Poto do a lot of the same things. They're pretty fantastic no matter where you put them. They can do all the tricks. I think Denzoa and Infer are roughly the same players, frag heavy players, but capable of being flexible. And then I think Sharp and Tiger are basically the same players. Runners, get a lot of touches, rocket jumping. I just think O is a better version of that. I think their teamwork is a little bit better. I think it will be a little bit better. I kind of anticipate, I don't know, I just think it's going to be 2 close losses for TWT, and OO will go into week 3 feeling pretty good about themselves.
Yeah, you guys are dead wrong, actually. I think that I'm going to break from what you guys are saying here, and I think that both teams are good. They're very good teams. This is the battle for number 1 going into week 3, most likely, right? And the teams are similar. You're right about that. I think, we have the 2 overseas captains, Dastin and Poto. We have the fraggers, Denzoa versus Infer, and then the Tiger versus Sharp. But I kind of think this is going to be at least for the regular season, kind of a passing of the torch from Dastin to Poto to the new, overseas captain that kind of makes something happen here. I look at these 2 teams. They're both pretty good. I was impressed with both in the first week. And they're not perfect, but they're works in progress, and they have a lot of room to grow. And I think that TWT has the edge here. And I actually think that edge is Denzoa. I think that Denzoa is going to control the mid on this map enough to stop Dastin from being the factor that he typically is. Denzoa or Poto, they're both going to be on Dastin, and I actually think that Tiger is going to probably overcome the offensive pressure from Double O. I think it could go either way. I think it's going to be a close game. I would be surprised if this is not the game of the week. In my opinion, this is the main event match. It's, in prime time. This should be the game of the week. But I think TWT probably takes this in 3. And I think that they'll probably be close games. But I think that Dastin they're going to find a chink in his armor this week, and they're going to stab for it, and we're going to see if he's human or not. And I have a feeling that TWT walks away with this win and ends up in the number 1 spot going into week 3.
Last but not least, we've got LOS versus BST. That will be Sunday 9:30, the end of the triple header. I really don't know. I think we touched on LOS probably more than any other team. And the bottom line is really just practicing and practicing with a consistent lineup, not just practicing. Are they going to have the type of communication that someone like Ross King and Caution have? Probably not. So, I lean towards BST here, although I do think, skill wise, if you added everything together, LOS is probably the more skilled team. That doesn't mean that they're going to work as well together. So I actually think this is a map that favors Ross King's style quite a bit as well. And especially where you just can't have, where LOS can't have enough practice to really communicate enough with each other. I think this one goes to BST in 2, actually. I know I'm going back on what I said earlier where I almost never pick teams to win in 2, but I just don't see LOS pulling this one out against a Ross King-led team, especially after, his first loss in a while. I just see this one being a BST win.
So yeah, I'm kind of with you. Did I anticipate that BST will win? But again, I'm less interested about the results, and I'm more interested in the storyline that comes with this one. It is the first time in a long time a Ross King team has looked vulnerable. We all give him the respect that he has earned, and that we think he'll get it together and he'll right the ship and there'll be a championship caliber team by the end of the season. Doesn't mean he wants to go down and lose another game either, though. And let's be real. LOS in a loss still had a decent showing week 1. It wasn't like they got, blown out of the server. They were competitive, very competitive. And as Ralph and I said, probably should have won and forced a tie. So I'm leaning towards BST, not based on what I've seen. I will say that. I'm leaning towards BST because I just think Caboose will get it right. But there is a part of me that's like, I don't know, like typically Caboose has had some pretty stable players on his teams, and there's no doubt Caution is one of them. I question Ion. I do. And if Caution and Caboose are solid and they play what they're, capable of playing, that's a playoff team no matter what. But if Ion doesn't play well or isn't stable or consistent, I think this is a team that can lose to anybody that's capable of putting a formidable team out there. And I think all of us agree LOS on paper is a very formidable team. So I'm going to throw out the classic Lee Corso, not so fast, my friends. I still anticipate a BST win. Do not be surprised, though, if LOS somehow pulls this one out. I will say that. But I am anticipating a BST, probably 2-0. Maybe LOS finds a way to take around. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Yeah, so, conventional wisdom, gut feeling, if I was going to bet, yeah, I'm going with Ross King here. I'm going with best ever. Number one, it's his own home field map, right? He made the map. I don't know if that actually counts for anything, but maybe it does, especially when it hasn't really been played a lot before. But to kind of echo your sentiments, yeah, this is the first time I think the best ever in a long time is there's nothing wrong with Ion or Vinny. They're both starter capable players, but are they on the level of Ty, Chain, Dranzer, or Legion? Probably not. I don't think I would say that they are. So then the question becomes, well, how much better does Ross King make this team to counteract that? So I would say, yeah, I would bet best ever here. I would bet that Ross King does not want to be embarrassed. He wants to come out and make a point, say, hey, the first week was kind of like a fluke, and now we're going to bury whoever we have to play in the second week. I don't even know if he's ever lost 2 weeks in a row in this league. So I would have to go best ever, but man, LOS, they have the tools to win this game. Again, it's going to come down to practice and preparation, and if they're there and they have everything lined up and they're ready to go 9:30 on Sunday night, then they can win this game. But it's not going to be easy for them. So I'm going to go best ever, probably in 2, but it would not surprise me if it goes the other way at all.
All right. Well, that'll do it for WDL Radio Week 1. Just to go through the matchups again, we've got one game tomorrow that is RIP versus SGS. That's Saturday at 11:59 p.m. We got a triple hander on Sunday, starting with SXP versus SFP. That's Sunday at 3:45. TWT versus 00 Sunday at 8 p.m. and LOS versus BST Sunday at 9:30 p.m. Thank you, Ralph and Hate Daddy. And unless you have anything else, we'll see everybody next week.
Make sure you go to doomleague.org and also make sure you go to Twitch TV/Doom Central and follow.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you upload your demos, too.
Oh, yeah. Demos. We didn't even talk about demo penalties. Rip has one.
Floor is yours.
The only one that I know for sure right now is that Rip has one. I think almost all the other demos are in, but we're going to know by tomorrow. So, and also for anyone watching, don't wait till Friday to put your demos in. Once the stats go up, you can upload them right away. You're just jeopardizing your team. So demos, upload them. Thank you.
I like turtles.
I'll see everybody next week.